left right out. So I went and saw Barbie. So this is Barbie review. So spoiler alert if you haven't seen that flick, which I have a daughter, so we end up going to see it. Excuse me. Which I know there's a lot of criticism of this movie, and I kind of was hesitant about taking my daughter, but I went ahead and just did it anyway because I assumed a lot of what I found is a lot of criticism, even from my side, is a little overdone, and that's exactly kind of what I found in this. It wasn't so much overdone in certain areas, but in other areas, I don't think that they got the irony of some of these scenes and some of the just hilarious things that happened during there. Anyway, so we get into it. The first scene is pretty much the cringe moment of what everybody's been saying. There's a lot of meaning into it. There's kind of like, if you've ever seen 2001 The Space Odyssey, they kind of went on there as like this evolutionary journey from young girls that can only basically play with dolls that are babies and essentially preparing them for motherhood, which we can argue whether that's a good thing for society. That's not a bad thing. And girls still play with baby dolls, but they acted that was like this parameter that these girls were actually they were hemmed in somewhat or under some kind of oppressive thought mechanisms. And anyway, so here comes Barbie, and it kind of unleashes all these various aspects of womanhood from the childhood level up, and they start breaking their baby dolls. Which to me, this is the first scene. I'm like, oh wow, this is probably not a good thing, because to me, I saw that as like a symbolism of, let's not embrace motherhood as a positive thing, but let's look at this materialistic kind of superficial means of goal setting to be the primary focus of one's life, and to put the family aside. And of course, that damn rabbit does it again. Every time I'm on here, you do that. Anyway, so they, you look at it from that perspective, and that's exactly what my mind's like. Oh, this is a big mistake. And then you go from, that, and the movie kind of spells it out, and it's very feministic, talking about how Barbie kind of unleashed those goals that, for young ladies to be whatever, an astronaut, a Supreme Court justice, whatever the case may be, that's regarded as some kind of high level in society, that doctor, even construction workers. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, not to say that those aren't the case, that you can't be that, but in this society, it pans over to Barbie land, and that's essentially what it is. All these women are holding these key levels, lawyers or Supreme Court justices, even construction workers, running businesses. Everyone has a house, and then you got kin, and every male there is kin. And besides Alan is an interesting archetype there. But anyway, everybody's kin, and they're kind of stupid. You don't really know where they live because they can't go hang out at Barbie's house. In fact, Barbie, the stereotypical one, doesn't want Ken around, even though he desires to be with her. Kind of a simp, beta male type thing, even though he displays, alpha male tendencies. If you want to call it that, just masculine tendencies, but then he displays some of these needy tendencies that is kind of unattractive, usually the females. Anyway, she says that, it's pretty much girl slumber party, and then you don't really know where these kins go. They live in this oppressive regime. It's a kind of a maternalistic hierarchy, and they hold no positions of power. They pretty much serve and desire to be around Barbies. And there's an interesting dynamic between the Asian Ken doll and then the Ryan Gosling, stereotypical Ken doll, which is kind of funny. It is hilarious, even though, they're trying to bash men. It's kind of stupid. Anyway, what happens is Barbie starts, everything's going good. Her world is full of basically a very childlike mentality where things are they just are there. And they took aspects of playing with the doll, like the fact that, there is no water and that it's fake food and all that. And then she can magically come off the roof, and then she's in a, sweet car and doesn't really have an engine, and they're just driving, so there's a little bit of that imagination playing into it. But if you look at it from a deeper level, it's what I got, especially after seeing the rest of the movie, was that, hey, this land is pretty much every liberal's dream. Essentially, you don't have to achieve anything. You're just there. You just get these positions, and you just get this stuff. So there's no real merit-based system. It's just you just happen to have this identity, and you get that. And the odd thing is, this really blew my mind about it too, right off the bat, and had me questioning, is when they panned over and they mentioned the pregnant Barbie and how she was discontinued, and everybody kind of ostracized her. And I was like, that's odd, because there's other weirder Barbies there, and there even is some other discontinued Barbies that aren't given the same treatment as the pregnant Barbie, which goes along with those lines. They're trying to downplay a woman actually having a family and children, as though that's somehow lesser than pursuing a career, which is asinine and is one of the downfalls of our own society. So you go on to that, Barbie starts thinking about death, so these thoughts come in, and that's when the party kind of stops. Certain things starts happening to her that is not in the realm of Barbie land, so she has to take this journey, which is weird. She had to go see the Barbie that's been kind of mangled by hard play, burnt hair and all this stuff. She goes over there, and she sends her to the real world. And Ken kind of sneaks along and comes to this real world with Barbie. Barbie gets to the real world, and immediately she's presented with kind of this, I guess this is what feminists view the world as, is there's men just gawking at chicks all the time and slapping their asses in public, which is, I don't know where that world exists. But Barbie essentially is feeling very insecure, where the exact opposite. Ken feels as though he's getting, he's given some sort of respect while he's there. Now, the interesting thing about this, because they're trying to play this to the patriarchy, because this is where they discover that, and they mention that so many times, it's unreal. But even in the patriarchy, this is where it's very interesting. Like I said, you have to actually have a brain and kind of like think through this, not just be, if you're just a regular Sean Hannity type and just lash out about this. You look at it, so Ryan Gosling, while Barbie's going through this, and let me just get this over with Barbie. Barbie going through this, she meets this girl because she has to go find the girl that's actually her owner. And she's like kind of the pseudo, whatever, Marxist type, SJW type person, makes her feel real sad, blah, blah. Anyway, I like to get to the Ken stuff. Everybody can talk about the Barbie. Anyway, so the Ken character, he starts walking around because he splits up they're looking for this person. And he starts seeing all these dudes, and they're coming out of the gym, and they're like bumping fists, and they're having a great time. And he sees guys that are in like power positions, and they're wheeling and dealing. So he thinks, wait, and people are giving respect that, hey, the men actually, they're in charge in this world. And in fact, he starts going around and he's like, well, can I, I want to be a lifeguard. And the guy's like, well, do you know how to swim, or do you know how to CPR? Or, that's just, do you have the qualification essentially? He's like, well, no, I beach. That's what they say. It's like as a verb almost. And he's like, well, you can't. So then he goes to this board meeting. He's like, well, where do I get a job as a high-level executive? And the guy's like, well, do you have an MBA or anything like experience, whatever? He's like, no, I'm a dude essentially. And he's like, well, you kind of need these things. I mean, and he makes some quips about the patriarchy anyway, and how they do it. So then he goes into a doctor's office and he's like, well, I'm going to need a white lab coat and all this stuff. And then he's like, well, you're not a doctor. He's like, but I'm a man. And he's like, can I talk to a doctor? And it's a female. He's like, well, I'm a doctor. And then he walks. Essentially, what ends up ironically happening in this scene is Ken, in the patriarchy of the real world, really finds out that it's a meritocracy, that it's based upon merit, that you have to have certain qualifications, even if you are a man, and you just can't just go in and get a job. So that's interesting, because it kind of refutes the main argument that I think most people thought the movie was making there, that men kind of rule everything in in the real world, right, as opposed to Barbie Land. Anyway, now here's what made the movie for me when it comes to like a comedic standpoint. Ken goes back, right, and Barbie kind of stays alone. Ken goes back, and he changes Barbie Land, which you don't find out till Barbie brings the people from the real world. Granted, I'm not trying to tell you the whole movie like in such detail. I'm trying to get out key points. Anyway, they come back, and it's Kingdom, right? So Ken had seen that all these men are like bro bumping and they're doing all this thing, and then there's cowboys and like police officers on horses. So he thinks that everything's about horses. He sees masculinity. He changes Barbie Land into Kingdom. So Barbie comes back and everything's changed. The women are no longer in charge. The men are. And here's where it gets back into this weird situation where it's not exactly what most conservatives are bashing this thing. So in Kingdom, not only is the men now are not that stupid, they're actually, you know, pursuing some intellectual capacity. They're reading, they're working out, they're enjoying certain activities. Some of them are like investment gurus, some of them are movie type. I mean, they all kind of have like these nuances, you know, into certain type of movies, which the Barbies end up playing that against them, and certain you know, peculiarities that normal men have, and they're playing sports. And she notices that they're like getting served beers by Barbies, but the Barbies are happy, ironically, and they're included in everything. So if you go to the party at Ken's house, their Barbies are welcome there, and whereas the other way around, the Kens weren't. So that's ironic that in that society, not only the Barbies happy, but they were included in what the men wanted to include them, as opposed to Barbie Land originally, where the Barbies like kind of treated Kens as second class citizens. But so anyway, let's just wrap this up. It's like 10 minutes of Barbie. They come and they change that. They use these things. They use kind of Kens. They use the Kens against each other and bring them down and reclaim Barbie Land, and then put the Kens back in their same place. Unfortunately, and they won't even, at the end of the scene, or almost the end of the movie, basically, the Kens ask for just a seat on the Supreme Court, and they're denied even that, even though they represent, you would assume, at least almost half the population. Last character. So, because you can get a lot of this review from a lot of other people, but I think I brought some interesting topics. Like, it's not exactly what a lot of conservatives say. It's interesting to look into this if you see the little ironies of it. It's actually more, there's more to this movie. So, in fact, like, Kingdom wasn't bad. The patriarchy is really a meritocracy, and men just can't just go into these positions without the certain qualifications. So that in itself is ironic. But then we go into this Alan character who helps the Barbies reclaim power, and he's always just there. He's kind of like the Simper McSimperton, even though a lot of the Kens not only displayed masculine traits, but they also displayed a lot of what we call simp type proclivities. And in fact, at the end, it was, you know, pretty much Ken had to come to that revelation and realize that he's been just being a very weak person towards Barbie because he desired her so much. But Alan is the ultimate simp. He's not masculine. It's kind of forgettable. The Barbies use him, but they don't really care too much about. They don't really care about him because he's a dude, and he's just fading away into the background. And it's interesting. You just got to see that. It's hard for me to really describe Alan, but you know Alan. Alan is the prototypical man that you have nowadays that's running around. But anyway, it's worth it just to see it for the Kingdom. The Ryan Gosling character and that whole little, whatever, 15, 20, 30-minute span in the movie is hilarious. Will Ferrell's kind of funny as well, but the Kingdom is definitely hilarious, especially from a man's perspective. Anyway, I don't think it was that bad of a movie. Like I said, you got to actually look into the nuance of it, and you can see different ironies and aspects of it that is reflective of somewhat of society, especially certain groups' thoughts of feminism. You see how that plays into it, but then you also see things that I don't think the writers, whatever, they were really intended to address, which is that like I said, that really we're in some sort of a meritocracy at varying degrees, and then how pretty much irrational these things are. You see the differences in Barbie Land and reality, where Barbie Land is just like, anyway, I don't want to keep it too long. For about 15 minutes. I'm going to leave it there. Anyway, that's my review on Barbie. Go check it out. It's not that bad. I'm going to go see Sound of Freedom, which I've been kind of lax on that, and I'll do another review on that. But like I said, I got some interesting experience or stories about that realm thing. But anyway, check it out, Barbie. Not as bad as everybody's saying. Not as bad, but maybe not. Maybe it's not for kids. All right, maybe it's not for your daughters or whatever. You need to actually explain to them what's going on in the flick. But anyway, peace.